podcast way here is Cristina from Knitting Books, etc. Take it away, Cristina.
Okay, hi, I'm Cristina, and my channel is Knitting Books, etc. Because of course, everyone knows I like knitting. It's an obsession I've had since I was a kid, and I like books. And so I actually have a Portuguese channel on knitting only, where every week I talk about my knitting and all my craziness around that, because people think, and I think that it's correct, that I'm not I'm a bit crazy because of all the stuff I do around knitting and books also, because actually one of my big loves are knitting books. So even yesterday I got on the post 10 new books on knitting. So that's one of my loves. And then I don't know when, I think it was I had an accident 2 years ago. And so a stupid accident. I slipped on the street, but I broke all my right side. And so I was at home for 1 year. I couldn't work. And so I started, let me try and do a channel in English where I talk about books and I talk with other people, because it was a way of meeting lots of other people on BookTube, which I've been enjoying. Although lately I got COVID and it was a little bit hard on me. I was very, very tired. That was the main symptom. It was awkward because I was, I don't know, totally under the weather. I don't know how to explain it. And so I haven't recorded for some time, but I really want to get back to it. So.
Yeah, well, good. What I'll do is you send me the links and I'll put everything down in the description of all your channels or anything else that you have. So if anybody want, people can go there. So you have your eight books there, do you? Or
yeah.
You've got your
and
8
it was, I have to say, very, very difficult to keep them to 8. And I said, I'm not going to do this, or at least I'm not going to travel and to risk to go into a desert island, because it's very, very, it's too difficult for me. So the first book, I even have it here, a version in English, because the first one I put was the Bible. And the reason is that, first of all, I'm a Catholic, so I read the Bible weekly when I go to Mass, but it is in bits and pieces, as you may know. And I have always had the idea of reading the whole. I have read the New Testament several times, but I have always had the idea of reading through the whole book, and I had never actually tried. I'm one of those people that started with Genesis and then stopped in Genesis, and that's how it was. So this year I am, and it's funny because today is the 182nd day of reading through the Bible from January the 1st to December the 31st, with the help of a podcast, which is called Bible in a Year podcast. Okay, so every day, and it's organized that you read, you go through, and I think that even some of the books, like wisdom books and so on, like the Psalms, and we read it actually more than once. But the rest and I am enjoying it immensely. So it's a book full of books, and some of the books are almost adventure books. Some are so interesting that I've felt actually like at the end of the day I was in a cliffhanger and I didn't want to go to the book and read. But one day I even read a bit because I wanted to know what's going to happen. I'm still reading the Kings and Chronicles, but it happens. So it's an adventure book, it's a poetry book, it's a wisdom book, of course, and so it's also a religious book, spiritual book. So it is a book. And of course, I have the Bible in Portuguese, but because I'm following this Bible in a Year podcast, which is in English, I even got the Bible they read through, the version they read through, which is this one here, which is actually quite colorful and interesting, has lots of other material like tables with, for example, the kings and so on. And I'm enjoying knowing this, and also enjoying to know things that I didn't know. Like, for example, that idea of separating the waters. It happens lots of times. I thought it was Moses that separated the Red Sea. No, lots of people are always doing that. It's funny. So, and there are other stuff which are actually, it's quite funny. So, awful stories as well. So, with wars and the things they did, like eating children and things like that. We have. I actually find funny, but it's true. They even had in that podcast, they had warning like, well, this is adult content and sometimes very violent and gruesome, which is true. So we have everything there. So it's a good book to be in a stranded in a desert island. I think it's a good book.
Yeah, well, it, like you say, it has everything. It's got every, and it is debate for Western literature.
That's right.
Really a big basis. And,
that's one of the things I like is knowing. When we read, the more references we know, the better, the greatest pleasure it is, isn't it? So that's one of those things I like. The reasons why I like the classics, it's that then I understand lots of references even in modern literature, because they refer to the Bible, they refer to the Odyssey, the Iliad, and all those classics. That's one of the reasons I always enjoyed reading the classics. So it's even in songs, sometimes we hear a reference that and I know, and it's always I know what he's referring to. Some people don't, and I think, will they enjoy it as much as I do?
Yeah,
no idea. Okay.
That's something like I need to get back into. I don't have a copy actually anymore. I like the King James version for reading, but in university, because I went through for archaeology, I actually took a number of years of biblical Hebrew. Okay. So I wasn't very good at it though.
Okay.
but yeah, one of my favorite books was, I always liked Jeremiah. Because
I still have I haven't got there. I read the other book. What's the book which is vanity? Everything is vanity. Or what's the Ecclesiastes? I love that one.
Ecclesiastes. Yeah. Well, they're all good, but it's almost like Jeremiah is like a bit of a comedy. He's like, saying, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Then he does it.
But they are even. Yesterday, I read the story of Jonah, which when we are kids, we always have those pictures books of the Jonahs inside of the whale. He was an awful guy. I didn't understand. I thought he was afraid because he didn't want to go to Nineveh because he was afraid of something. No, he didn't want them to be saved. He wanted them to be erased from the face of the earth. And so he was like, saying that, well, I went there, I saved them, and now that's why I didn't want them to be saved. So it's amazing.
It's every layer, it's everything that you would want, every story, and the great thing is you can read it that way, and then if you happen to be like, I'm not religious, but a religious person, it just adds more dimension to it as well.
Yes, it does. And it's very, very, very good. Yeah, I'm enjoying it a lot. So, shall I go to the next one?
Yes.
The next one I put was, okay, I don't have a complete book, but I guess there is a complete book.
There's many
of Jane Austen's novels. I have them all separate, very old versions of mine, Penguin Black Spine, but I had others because I read them when I was a kid. That's one of the books. I read them when I was a kid. I was telling you before that I started reading when I was very young. My mom still remembers me going after her, annoying her with a book and saying, Mom, these letters like this, CHAs in Portuguese is chá, which is tea. Okay, so your mama, yes, it is. So because I wanted to learn to read, because I wanted to read books. I have 3 older brothers and 1 older sister, and they all went to school and they all had books, and I wanted to read them. So then when I was kind of 9 years old, 10, I started reading big people books. My mom had Jane Austen's book in Portuguese, which is funny because some of them were the titles have nothing to do with the English title. So my mom's name is Emma. So she had Emma. Emma had that title, and it's still my favorite book by Jane Austen is Emma. Okay, I like her. Many people don't like her. She's not a very nice and sweet heroine, and that's why I like her. But I heard that Jane Austen also preferred her to any other heroines. But I remember that one of the books I read in Portuguese was called The Blue Blood. And a friend of mine, when he went to England, he wanted to find the blue blood. And everyone in England said, the blue blood? There's no title like that. And he said, oh, yes, it is. She wrote the blue blood. It was Persuasion, imagine. And so they translated to the blue blood. So I always loved her stories, her wit. She's funny. She also the life of I really like the end of the 18th century, the beginning of the whole the 19th century. I love that literature. So always loved, and I'm still discovering new authors because, for example, last 2 years ago, I discovered Trollope. I had never read anything by him, and now I read all the Chronicles of Baskerville. I'm now one of my personal projects of this year is to go through the Palliser stories. So I'm in the middle. I'm just finishing the third book. I'm reading one every 2 months, and I love the literature of those years. I also love Dickens. I couldn't choose it, and it was very annoying. That's why I say that this is very annoying. But Jane Austen is a favorite. Well, I know that she's a favorite of many people. Many people love Jane Austen, and I also have lots of DVDs with adaptations. I don't like those. There's a tendency of people doing kind of spin-offs from like what happens to this sister after and so on. I don't know. I dislike those types of things because I like to I have those characters in my mind as they are in the book, as they were written, and I don't like that people do that to I say, leave my characters alone. That's my what I normally say. So no, I don't like those types of adaptations.
Yeah, well, she's always been popular, and then we got there's Jane Austen July.
That's right. That's right.
Coming up. I read all her. Well, the 6 that you say there. I read them all in the 80s when I was younger. Yeah. I figured I'm done with her. I did not really care for her, but because so many people talk about it, but see, I'm hearing stuff about her in different ways.
Yes.
And it's like maybe 35 years later or so, I should revisit her.
Yes, perhaps you should. That when I was in at university, I studied. My course was in Portuguese and English. Language and literature. So I studied both language and literature, Portuguese and English. And we talked about the novel, and as, for example, Emma being one of the first novels where you can see, for example, the inside of what's in a person's mind. And she was a very, very modern writer, Jane Austen. Mm. And we studied that in the history of the novel and the history of literature, of world literature, actually. So, and especially the novel Emma, which is, perhaps I was a little bit influenced by that too, as being one of my favorites. Also, I'm a bit of a contrary person, so everyone likes Pride and Prejudice. So I said, no, Emma is my favorite, and that's how it is. But but it's funny. She was a very witty person too, and so I laugh a lot when I read because some of the certain details that, it's one of those that when you read, you always get new quotes, in your mind because they are interesting, very funny.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I think you've convinced me now to actually reread. I'm not sure when, probably not this year, but probably next year. Okay. I'll try one of them. Yeah. I'll try Emma. Why not?
Emma, that's right. I always say people, but you've been warned that many people dislike Emma. Okay, First, it's one of the longest, perhaps the longest, and also because some of them don't like the characters. I don't know why. I really do like that. Okay, then we have, and I have the new version here. I love books, physical books too, because I'm one of those people that likes to smell books. So I need to show you this one. It's my new version. Okay, look at this. It's a lovely version of. It has Tolkien's illustrations, so very naive. It's not like I have also, for example, I could have brought it just to show you the Silmarillion with all those famous paintings of some illustrators. This one hasn't. This has only the Tolkien's illustrations, but it smells so good. I always like book. The entire experience for me, it's smelling books and so on. So I've read The Lord of the Rings several times. I have always loved fantasy. I sometimes I think maybe I didn't grow up because I when I was a kid, I always imagined magic and things like that. I still like to read those fantasy books. I love fantasy, but this has everything as well, and it's one of those books that every time I read, I find new things. Yeah. And it's one of those, as I said, I'm a big rereader, and when I reread a book, I don't mind. For example, some people say, oh, but it's very long, or oh, but I don't mind. I'm not running to finish the book just to say that I finished the book. No, I'm reading to enjoy my reading, and so I like to find new details. I like to and that happens to me when I'm reading. Oh, this here, and because I'm rereading, I'm noticing new things, and that's how. And I love it, and it's I found it funny because when I was thinking of these books, I watched Scott's interview with you, and he mentioned something that I too felt, which is I would like to have a volume that I could carry Silmarillion with me as well. Okay, I loved Silmarillion. I read it. Silmarillion, I hadn't read it before 2 years ago, or I don't know, and I loved it. And especially now that I'm reading the Bible, then again, you can see in Silmarillion, it's a parallel. The creation of the world and the creation of Middle Earth. It's so interesting, and seeing and comparing all those characters to what I'm now reading and listening, because I'm reading and listening at the same time with that Bible in a Year podcast. So it's an amazing book, also full of different stories. Of course, it's not a novel, as you may know. It's several stories, but it's an amazing book, and I loved it a lot. So, but well, if I have to choose or pick one, I will pick The Lord of the Rings, because it's a full story from the beginning to end, and there's lots of amazing stuff here. I even like the poems and the songs. When I was younger, it was a little bit annoying to me because I wanted to know the story and go on with the action, if you want. Now I like, because I like language. I always liked, looking at the word, and that's one of the things that Tolkien has. He was an expert in language, was he? And that's something that I always loved, is language and the words and how the words are formed, everything related to words. And that's why I also would like to learn. I always say that, but I would like to learn as many languages as possible, because I would like to know how they were formed, and also to read the originals, as if I could. But so that's something that it's fascinating to me too. And I am slowly collecting all those books that he wrote too, where he explains the languages that he created, because it's more than one. Even the elves, there are several elfish languages and so on. I find that fascinating to me too.
Yeah.
So
it's something that I've yet to read. As I've said that it's one of those sort of gaps in my reading.
Yeah. How did you manage not to read it?
Well, I've never been a fantasy fan.
Right.
That's the
Okay.
thing. While others have, but
Mhm.
it's something that it's one that regardless, if
Mhm.
I say I hate fantasy, I still want to read it because it
Okay.
is important.
Yeah.
And
It's a
I'm a bit
classic.
afraid.
Mhm.
Like I probably will read it next year
Mhm.
with Mark from Book Time with Elvis.
Okay.
Uh,
Mhm.
but I'm a bit afraid of getting caught up in it. And yeah, there's all this other stuff that
Yeah.
he's.
It is
That's what I'm
endless.
afraid of.
Yes. Yes. It is endless. You have. Yeah. It is a kind of a bottomless well, isn't it? So but it's fascinating, and I really like it, and it's quite entertaining as well. So it is. So it can be heavy and light at the same time. You have
Mm.
everything there. So then, of course, many. So I was a little bit miffed that some others also chose the complete Sherlock Holmes, but
Oh, it's going to be popular. It's going to
I
be.
always it is because first of and if you can, I don't know if you well here I couldn't carry because I already have I didn't have any electricity and machines to read. But I also I almost every year I read Sherlock Holmes because I enjoy the stories. I have them. I've always had them in physical books, and then I have several versions of audiobooks as well. And last year, I listened to a version read by Stephen Fry, and it was a great experience because it's not first of all he's a very good narrator. I like him narrating, but he also wrote an essay as an introduction for each book. And it's fascinating. He also talked about his experience because it had a great impact in his life. Uh, uh, and actually, a very big influence as how his life developed afterwards. Sherlock Holmes and him wanting to watch film in London, so running away from home to watch Sherlock Holmes and so on. And I enjoyed his reading a lot too. So last year in December, that's what I listened to his reading. But I also like to enjoy just pick a story. I always loved the first story when I was a kid again because I'm always curious. I read about what, for example, the teacher, one of the professors of Conan Doyle's at university, who was the inspiration for Sherlock Holmes, was a doctor, and he could look at a person and already know what he's going to complain about and everything. And I also find it fascinating that he even then became famous and gave kind of shows where people would go to him and he would say things about them that like it happens in the books with Sherlock Holmes. So
Yeah, that's
I always love those stories. They are quite entertaining, and I also like the atmosphere. I always loved that 19th century foggy atmosphere,
yes,
which,
yeah.
which is present in the books. And then, of course, I watched several films and TV series with Jeremy Brett, for example, and so on. And I always loved that. So it's part of my imagination also to.
Oh yeah, I think it is for a lot of people. It's Dr. Bell, I think it is that you're thinking of there.
Yes, it is. It is. I think it's Arthur Bell or something like. No, Arthur Conan Doyle. No,
Yeah.
something Bell. Yes, it is. I read about him. I had short biography of him and
Yeah.
how.
And there are a lot of like I've listened to snippets of Stephen Fry's. I didn't realize he did an essay in front. That makes it more interesting to me as well. Like because I think Derek Jacobi I think has done a complete as well.
Yes.
Jeremy Brett has done a few. There's so many.
I have several actually because some were
everything.
someone were given to me. Some I bought. This one I like him reading, so I bought it. But there are many. Yes, there are many, and they are always all interesting. And so I sometimes listen to some. But yes, Stephen Fry he does an introduction to each of the books. So
That's
very interesting. So yeah,
that's interesting.
yeah. And so then I put here, well, and this is when I found out now when I was reading this list again, because I wrote this, that I forgot something. I hope Tom LA Books will forgive me, because I always said that one of the books I would bring would be the Divine Comedy. And I think that it would be one of the books. But I chose the Book of the New Sun, because we are reading now. There is a group of people in Voxer that is reading the Book of New Sun. And I'm actually going to speed up my reading now in July, because I was reading some other books and I got late. But this book is a puzzle to me. It's a kind of a riddle, but I always liked to solve riddles and puzzles and things like that. So that's why I think that this is actually fascinating. And I haven't read, I'm still in the middle of the second book, The Claw of the Conciliator. And so I'm going now to concentrate on that. But the reason why I chose it was precisely because I haven't finished it. And I know it's a kind of an endless book, because people are always rereading it. It's actually there is even a audio podcast which the tagline is precisely that. They say, you never read Wolf, you always reread it, or something like that, because it's impossible to read it. You have to reread it to grasp the full meaning of. And I believe that even if you reread it several times, you still have doubts about many of the things. So that's one of the reasons I said, well, I have to take something new with me, and something that will give me lots of things to think about and discover and so on. So that's one of
it's something like before we started recording, I would say I've read, like, the thing is, I don't think I've read it all. I think I've read probably a good half of it. And then I'd completely forgotten about it. And I think it was last year I was reading a book about science fiction, and it was mentioning, well, that sounds great. And then I got a copy of the SF Masterworks, or the two volumes of the four books.
Yes.
And it's up behind me here somewhere.
Okay.
And I need to get to that sometime. And
it's
that's why I want to keep it around.
Yeah. But it's very strange, because you start reading it and it seems something like in the Middle Ages, but then you have flying things, flying machines there, and you have, well, what did I read? Did he flew away? Yes. So there are. It's a very strange book, but very, very funny, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm also enjoying the commentaries of the others that are all puzzled with what is happening here. So that everyone is finding it strange. But it's very good, very good. Then another book I chose because I haven't read it, and I said, well, I have to have something new, and this monster of a book, I have it here, which is The Essays of Montaigne. First of all, because I also write one of my favorite. I always love to read kind of, for example, biographies, autobiographies, diaries, journals, and these are not journals; they are essays. But he writes about everything. So it's again kind of I have lots and lots of stuff to entertain myself. It's also, again, as I said, I like classics and I like to read. And also classics also refer to other works and other classics, which I find it, I always like that too. I remember studying at university, it was in Portuguese, we call it intertextualidade. In English, I think it's intertextuality. I don't know if that's the word, but that's how we were always talking about that and how books refer to other books. And so that's one of the reasons I like classics. And I am actually, so they say that, and this is something I don't know because I haven't started. Well, I read bits, but I haven't started to stop and read from book one. But they say that he is the almost originator of the essay.
Yeah,
So
the author of
yes,
yeah.
I always heard about that. So I'm curious, and I know that his range of topics is immense. So I'm very curious about that. So
Yeah. They're wonderful. And as to say, yeah, the people do call him, or I've always heard him referred to as the father of the essay. And then another one that the English one is Bacon.
Yes.
But
Yes.
his stuff is you can't speed read his stuff. Let's put it that way. But it may be Montaigne might be the same in French. It might be a bit archaic, but obviously the translation. Does it say who the translator is of that edition?
Donald M. Frame. It's in the cover, actually.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Translated by Donald M. Frame. I don't know.
I have. I'm not sure if he's the same one. There's a limited editions club that I have, but I just found out recently because I reread one of my favorites, French novel is Gargantua and Pantagruel, and it was translated by M.A. Screech, and I found out he did the Penguin version of Montaigne. So it'd be because I like Montaigne so much, I do have to get that and probably read these things in tandem or something like that.
Okay, yeah. Yes, I want to. I'm very interested in reading, and as I said, I'm already planning my next year's reading, and I found out it was not planned first, but now it is that I was interested in reading some it's rereads French books. So I decided, well, why not do kind of a thematic year on French literature? Because of course, one of the books I'm not going to take because I cannot take more than 8, but it was the Count of Monte Cristo, and which I always loved. I read it again when I was a kid in Portuguese several times, and then I read it. I also read it in English, I think, and because the translation, I don't know how it is now. To be fair, I have to say that. But when I started reading as a young adult, I found that the Portuguese translations were not very good, and so I tend to read translations in English because. But I now, because French, I can read French. I want to read them in French. So I want to read again. Not only Proust, which I want to read in French, I also want to read The Count of Monte Cristo, and let's see if I can read Les Miserables in French as well. So that's my intention.
Yeah, that had always been a dream of mine, and I just never learned French. But to read Balzac, Victor Hugo, and on and on. And speaking of translations. It's too far down here for me to get. There's a translator that's been doing, you probably aware, I think it's Lawrence Ellsworth, I think. He's doing the Three Musketeers cycle. And I'm really hoping he will get to the Count of Monte Cristo. I'm really hoping he will. But anyway.
But the Three Musketeers, I also read them when I was younger, and it's something that I would like to reread also. But let's see what I can. But one of the things I'm going to read is Montaigne. I'm not going to start Montaigne in French because this is not modern French. It's classic, an older book. So I'm first going to read it in English, and then we'll see. Okay, but I'm quite curious about it too. And then I chose a Portuguese book, of course, a classic. And I'm going to show you here. This is my son. Well, my son almost destroyed this because this is a school version. It's complete. Lusíadas, that's the Lusíadas, I think, in English. And by Luís de Camões. This is an epic poem, the great Portuguese epic poem that tells you the history of Portugal in 10 cantos too. And it's a classic. I used, when I was a kid, this version in school as well. And so I remember one of the things I loved was these, let me show you here. these color tables tell you, for example, some of the things are the history, some of the things are the poems and the poetry, some of the things are the gods in Olympus, because this is a classic book where you have gods in the Olympus and their intervention in things related to man. And because the Lusiads are the sons of Luzu, which was a god. He was the son of, I don't know, I think in the Greek version is Bacchus. No, that's the Latin one. Bacchus, which is the Dionysius, yes, Dionysius in Greek. Yes, Dionysius in Greek. So, and Luzu was his son. It's the god of the wine, Dionysius. And so, we are a wine country, as you may know. So, and so that's the god. And then we have, but it's a classic. It's a poem. It's an epic poem. It's we have everything like it's very. If you know the Odyssey or the Iliad, you will understand lots of the structure is the same, the way the history is told is the same. He was a very good poet as well. So the poems in itself, each poem is also wonderful in the language, and it's funny. It starts with. As the classic poems normally do, in medias res, where then you have a kind of a flashback to the beginnings. And so Vasco da Gama, which is one of the Portuguese first discoverers, he's telling the history of Portugal, and it's so interesting how he's describing, first of all, the geography and where Portugal is. And so he describes Europe as a woman lying down with her head like this. And so he says that the elbow is Great Britain, because she's lying down like this. Her elbow is Great Britain, and the face with which she looks at the west is Portugal. So it's the face of Europe because it's the western part of Europe, and it's looking to the west. And it's a very beautiful poem, and you have several different parts, of course. But this book is full of notes, because again, lots of classic references here, and so and I need to keep there in the island. I need to keep with the Portuguese history and language. So. And the muses of the river here. So finally, I thought about a lot about this. So I have an app in my phone, which is the Book Buddy Plus, and the first where you scan the ISBN of the books and it catalogs your books. So I'm starting to do that, but I started with my knitting books, and it's a little bit ridiculous that some years ago I had to part with some of my books when I moved because of space and so on, and I am still suffering because of that. So it was very painful, and but now I'm slowly building up my library. But it's a little bit ridiculous that I have 400 books about knitting. Yeah, about knitting, because it's not literature. It's not, no, it's just knitting books, okay? Some of crocheting in there too, but knitting. And knitting can be, it's very simple, but can be very complex. So I decided that I have a shelf here full of reference books. So very generic reference books. And the one I chose is not the best, as in the most deep it's this one here. And it's the ultimate knitting book, but I have better ones. but this one has it's comprehensive enough to be the only book I have, and it has lots of images and pictures. And so if I am stranded and I don't remember how to do a buttonhole, I can come here and find it, or how to do something very specific. I can come here and find it. So it's a very good book, very comprehensive. It's a nice book, smells nice. Lots of white space, to which I find it. For me, it's important. I like to. The words need space to breathe in a way. So, but it's a very good reference book, and so I need one because I have never been. Although I haven't, I started knitting when I was 4. So I'm going to turn, next week, I'll turn 59. So it's been 55 years knitting. Still, I don't, many things I normally say, that people say, oh, but you know how to knit very well. No, I know to read. That's all what I say. It's like cooking. Some people are intuitive cookers, and no, I know to read. I know to read a book. I also had more than 500 cooking books, so I know how to read and replicate what it says. The same with knitting. I can create, of course, but techniques, I need to read them. That's how it is with me. So I always relied on the books for that. That's why I love all those books. So I need to take one to the island. Of course, there's a problem here, which I thought about it. I have friends who can they can transform, for example, wool from the beginning, from the animal to a strand. They wash the fleece, they prepare it, they card it, then they spin the. I'm not a spinner because I cannot afford to have another hobby, because I don't have time enough to read and knit all I want. It's so ridiculous the way I am, that some years ago I had an accident in the street, and I was bleeding a lot, and I thought I was going to die. And the first thought in my mind was, oh gosh, so many knitting projects I wanted to do, and now I cannot because I'm going to die here. So I was thinking about all the books and the projects and the yarn I have. So stupid of me, but that's how, in a way, obsessed I am with knitting. So I cannot afford another hobby like that. But so in the island, I had to have, of course, the island is a kind of a magic island, so there's yarn there, So I'm going to
it shows, I guess, you are a dedicated knitter. Let's put it that way.
Yes, I am. And so there's yarn there, and so I need, for my projects, I only take this book with me, and then we'll see after how I deal with that.
Yeah, there was something that I was looking for, because if I could find it, I'll do it for my hours in my library. I've got a poetry book that somebody has knitted a dust jacket. And I can't. I hope I can find. I was going to find it to show you, but I can't find it. But if I do find it, I'll it'll be next Wednesday's.
Yes, but there are people still do that. Okay, they
right.
still do that. They still do in knitting for books, and also sometimes even covers for phones and things like that. They still do that. Yes. So yeah. So then we had to pick up an audio, wasn't it?
Yeah. The idea is, I'm not too fussed on this, but the idea is like one record, but obviously it doesn't really get that. A box set is fine, so we'll pretend you got a box set of CDs.
Yeah. So what actually first I thought about music, and I'm into classical music. I think that some people cannot, for example, spend one day of their life without listening to music. I'm not actually like that. I'm a very visual person. I like films, I like books, and I don't listen to music a lot. I do listen to some classical music from time to time. It's kind of when I remember, I listen to music, But then I confess that I watched Scott's interview, and he went with the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I also listened to actually. And I said, oh, I can take an audiobook. I am a big fan of audiobooks. I don't know why, actually, because I said, and it's true, I'm a very visual person. I don't normally like to listen to people. For example, even people that sometimes read a bit of look at this news here, piece of news here. And I'm always with my mind somewhere else. I cannot even follow an instruction of like a direction. How do I go from here to here? People start telling me, and I'm already with my mind elsewhere. So I remember studying that in psychology in university, that I'm a 100% visual person. So I need a map, I need to look, I need to pick up. So it's strange for me that I enjoy audiobooks. But normally what I do is I listen to and read at the same time. For example, when I'm eating, I have the book in front of me. I can be listening and taking a look at the book, but I can, if I need, just look at my knitting. But now I can, even when I'm doing some chores at home and so on, I can even listen to audiobooks. And so when I thought about that, I have an audiobook that I am enjoying a lot, which is the complete works of Shakespeare. And that was a relief, because then I could move Shakespeare out of my 8 books and add something else to the list, because I was going to take Shakespeare, of course. I studied English literature. Well, English language and literature. I studied also American literature and so on. So, but Shakespeare was part of my education, and I always liked it. Even when I was younger, I always wanted to watch, those old BBC plays that we had here, a lot of them, and I liked them. Then I went, when I was in my third year, it was during the Gulf War, so it was in 1990. I went to London as an exchange student, and I studied more Shakespeare there too. And then I remember that I even had watched, the Kenneth Branagh and Emma Thompson, when they were starting with the Renaissance Theatre. They came here to Lisbon and they performed King Lear and Midsummer Night's Dream. And I always loved Shakespeare and theatre. And so I wanted to take Shakespeare. And this audiobook, it's actually, it was something that I found recently, last year, which is, I'm an Audible subscriber, and I bought, with one credit, I bought all the plays, all the poems, everything. And it's performed by a theater company. They call it the Marlowe Theater Company. And then they have, I think, actors that are guests. So they have classical actors like Ian McKellen, Derek Jacobi, and others performing as well. And so I love to actually read the plays while I listen, and it's almost like you're watching the play on stage. So it's I really like that. So of course I couldn't bring the book with me, but I would enjoy listening to the plays. And they have all those, even as I said, sounds, like in stage you have the sounds of people moving, or the trumpets when the king's coming and the trumpets play and things like that, that put you in the play if you want. So I would take that with me, of course. And that,
I think they sounded, like I said before we started, I don't think I'd ever come across the Marlowe company. Like, obviously it's I'm pretty sure it's probably after Christopher Marlowe, but I'd not heard of them as a company. Yeah. And I do like that kind of stuff too. It's like it always reminds me of old radio
Yes.
dramas,
Yes.
because
Yes.
you can visualize it in your mind. But
Yes.
what's your favorite? Do you have, of all the Shakespeare that you've read or listened to, what's your favorite play?
I don't think I have a favorite, but I like the tragedies most. When I was a kid, I enjoyed knowing by heart, for example, Julius Caesar, and I knew, for
By
example,
heart.
Mark Antony's speech by heart. Rome, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do stays after him, but the good is often turned with their bones. I knew that by heart. I still know some bits. So I liked Julius Caesar. I like King Lear too, and I love, for example, I don't know, you must know the film, for example, the Akira Kurosawa Run, which is
Yeah.
a version of the King Lear. I always loved it because of that, and uh, I like Hamlet, of course. I do. It's one of the plays I like, but I like. I don't. I still don't have. First of all, I haven't read them all. I read Macbeth. I studied Macbeth and I loved Macbeth. Even the other day, I found several books of mine from the university about Macbeth because I studied and I loved it a lot. And I also saw some years ago. I saw there was a kind of modern adaptations of the plays, and I liked Macbeth a lot. It was about the guys were some people in a restaurant or something like that. But it was, yes, it was very good actually. I also like the comedies. I reread, uh, and even, but funny enough, I noticed that I'm also it's something that I'm also discovering new things. The other day, I read The Taming of the Shrew, and I have read it several times and I didn't recall reading the beginning of the play. It's not because The Taming of the Shrew, it's an historical play in a sense of it's a comedy, but it's not it's historical fiction, if you want, because it's spent in another place in another time. But the introduction is in England and at present time. And I don't remember reading that. So it's also funny that sometimes we find new things because I don't remember. And it's something that it's not solved actually. So it's the introduction to that play. But so I don't think I have. I'm perhaps either Macbeth, Hamlet, the tragedies. I like the tragedies.
Yeah,
So
I've said before, mine is sort of Macbeth, I think, and I love the Orson Welles film version as well. It's not wholly accurate, but it's just
yes,
beautiful looking. And the thing that I find about Shakespeare or a lot of authors is I read them when I was younger and I enjoyed them. And then I read them maybe 10 or 15 or 20 years later and I've enjoyed them. And then I think about 5 or 6 years ago, I read a couple again. And I enjoy them again, but in different ways because
yes.
I've grown, I've become older, and you see
You read more, isn't
exactly.
it? Because everything you read, it will influence your reading again. So, yeah, that's one of the things. That's why I like, as I normally say, classic works, because I think that's the characteristic of a classic, a good, great classic, is that we always enjoy it, and our enjoyment is different, isn't
Yeah,
it? But it evolves in a way.
yeah,
So, and yeah, and well, I always loved it, and I find it's a world in itself, the Shakespeare too.
mm.
So anyway, so now my luxury item.
I wonder what that could be.
Yeah.
I wonder
So
what that could be.
of course, yes, of course. So as I said, I thought about it. First, I thought about cheating and having a kind of a digital device where I could access lots of info in the internet, for example. So, but then that was cheating. Then I thought about, as I said, because I always think about, first of all, I say that I must be an alien, but because I'm allergic to lots of things here on this planet. So being in a desert island would be problematic for me because I'm allergic to almost every plant and every thing there is. Then I'm also allergic to lots of stuff of eating stuff. So that would be troublesome. But when I was a kid, I was
Remember, this is a magic island, so
yes, that's right. So
will
because
disappear.
it must be a magic island, and so because it's a magic island, it has an infinite supply of wool and yarn. And I'm a knitter. I would take my knitting kit, meaning needles and notions, accessories, everything we need to knit, because it would be delightful to be there, just listening to Shakespeare, for example, while reading and knitting without a break. Because I like to, some people don't understand this. I'm a knitter, not because some people are knitters because they want the final product of knitting. For example, I knitted this shirt, I'm wearing it, it's good, but that's not why I love to knit as the process of knitting. Picking yarn, smelling yarn, especially if it's wool. But then also there are several types of yarn, not only wool, but and experiencing everything. It's amazing. The colors of the yarn. And then imagining a project. Either you imagine it yourself or you can look at the, again, infinite number of projects of patterns that exist. Reading the books about techniques, about the history. One of the things I love is the history of knitting. And even yesterday, one of the books I received yesterday, it's a French book, because now I'm also starting buying, I have books. You cannot imagine, I have books here in Estonian, in Russian, I have a book that I bought from Latvia, and the way I bought it was like this. I couldn't understand a word. I knew that book existed only secondhand. It was a very old book. And I wanted that book secondhand. I went, I searched for it, and I had to spell it letter by letter because it's a very strange language, Latvian. And then I found the book, but I couldn't register in the website because it was all in Latvian, and I didn't know how to. There was no translation. So I thought of, well, there was the email of the webmaster. And I said, oh, he must know some English. So I wrote in English to that webmaster, and he put me in contact with the seller. And then we managed to discuss the price of the book, and I sent her the money. It was some years ago. It was not as easy as now. So I had to go to the post office and send Western Union something or whatever. And then they made a mistake and then they sent it to Lithuania instead of Latvia. And then it was a confusion, but I managed to buy the book. Of course, because knitting books also have lots of graphics. And so it's possible for me to understand but I like the history. And yesterday I received a French book, which is so interesting because it's about the sailors of the North Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. And so the first paragraph, I didn't know about that. I knew the subject, of course. It was people from the North Sea and Atlantic Ocean, the sailors and so on. But the first paragraph starts with Vasco da Gama and the discoveries and his travels, and then all other Portuguese sailors. And also it mentions, of course, Great Britain, Ireland, so the Atlantic Ocean and the sea, and the people, the fishermen from the North Atlantic, and cod and salt cod, which is something that we breed here in Portugal. As you know, it's we import everything from Norway. I think that we are almost their exclusive clients of cod. So it's very interesting. So learning the history of knitting, it's also amazing. So there are lots of good books about that. One of the book is actually a bishop of Anglican bishop that wrote, and I don't have that book, and it's a pity because I think it's called The History of Knitting, and it's written by a Anglican bishop, and it's very famous, but it's now out of print, and it's difficult for me to grab it. It's very expensive now, so that's why.
Yeah.
But
Well, I like that fact that people, or I do this as well. You get interested in one thing. You're with knitting, and then it gets to the books, and then you get to the history of it.
yeah,
It's like film for me. It's the same type of thing. I'm interested in it, but then it brings me to books. It
yeah,
brings me to other things, the history and everything like that.
yes,
And I
yes,
love how that works.
yeah.
Well, I should say I love it. I hate it at times because it just opens up too much.
Yes, yes. And you want, if you're a completist, as I am, you want
Yeah.
everything, you know, about that. That's how I'm a little bit like that too. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, this has been great, Cristina. What like you've mentioned a little bit what you're going to do next year on your channel.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you have specific short term and then long term goals?
Not yet. I still need, you know, it's sometimes it's a little bit difficult to restart, and I have to restart because I used to have, you know, all those regular things like what I'm reading, what I read this week, what I'm going to read. I would do. It's a very low key channel. Some tags that, so that's what I'm doing. I now, although I do participate in lots of sometimes too many read-alongs and things like that. So I'm currently reading through the Palliser series of Trollope, and I'm reading with other people because I'm part of many others. But that's I will restart my normal recordings and videos telling a bit about what I'm reading and keeping for me it's more like keeping the conversation with other people about what we are reading and so on. It's not anything very it's not a very big project, no, but although again I'm thinking, but for me it's kind of personal projects. I'm thinking about, again, as I said, dedicating 2023 to French literature.
I like that idea. I like that idea a lot because I'm rereading some this year, but I've decided that next year I'm going to continue reading. Well, mostly bigger books is the theme, and a lot of the ones that you mentioned are bigger, but I'll have to do them in English translation though.
Okay, no, I'm going to try, as I said. So several people, we read Don Quixote this year, and I decided, and it was worthwhile. First of all, again, I had tried several times. And when I was younger, I found it very boring. I think it was not for me. It was not the right time to read it. This time, I didn't find it boring at all. It's very good. I liked it a lot. And reading it in Spanish, it adds a bit to especially the funny aspects, because it's not only Spanish, it's a little bit of classic Spanish. And so it also adds to being a very funny book, and so I like to read it. I enjoyed reading it a lot in Spanish. I'm also, for example, reading I have the complete short stories by Borges, and I also Cuentos Completos. I decided to try and reading it in Spanish as well. It's difficult because he was not very easy. Writer, so it's but I am trying bits by bits. So and so next year it will be Proust in French, and we'll see what else. The Count of Monte Cristo too. I read it in English. I read it in Portuguese. So now I think it's time to read it in French, and perhaps some Victor Hugo as well. And then we see Zola, Balzac, and so on.
Yeah. Yeah, I might join. Well, in English though is the Proust because I do want to reread that at some point. I've decided it's not going to happen this year, but I'll definitely do it next year. But no, this has been great, Cristina. And what I'll do is, everybody, I'll put down the links down below in the description, So you can go to her channel and your knitting channel as well for anybody that's interested. Because there's even I don't know. Do they translate? Because you said it's in Portuguese, but
it's in Portuguese. I don't know. I don't because I don't know if there's that automatic thing that.
There's like you can get the sort of reading thing, but it might just do it in Portuguese. So
I don't know how it is.
But I'm sure people will know. People will know. And they can just watch you as well do it, or show what you're doing.
Showing my things. That's how I do it. Showing my projects and so on. But it's,
this has been great. And just stick around for a minute. We'll end the recording here for a second. So bye everybody. I'll see you next time.
Bye.